And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome to Open Connection. I'm your host, Robert Pictou. Our show today comes to you from the traditional and unceded territory of the Tsimshian people. Formed in 2014, the Northwest BC Resource Benefit Alliance was created to negotiate a new funding agreement with the province to ensure the Northwest benefits for the tremendous level of economic development activity in the region. Minister Cullen gives us an update as we begin today's Open Connection.
I just got off a conversation with the Ministry of Transportation and talking about improvements that have happened in the Northwest, because we're often talking about our roads and bridges, our highways, how they're doing, and a bunch of investment that went in last year on some pretty major bridges that are going in, a lot of paving, and this year it's one of those blessings and hard, because as we start to travel a bit more in the summer is also the time when we have to do a lot of road work, but millions and millions of dollars going in for repaving along Highway 37, along Highway 16, but also trying to be doing it in a way that allows as much traffic to flow as possible so people can keep moving. But I know we need these investments. I know a lot of our highways take a pretty heavy pounding because of a lot of the industrial activity that goes on. I recently had a conversation in Victoria with Premier Eby and representatives from the Resource Benefit Alliance, a number of mayors that came down from the north, making really good progress on pushing that agreement forward so that we can eventually share between ourselves and the region better the benefits that come out of a lot of that resource activity. As well, we saw the first major mine in 10 years get announced just a little while ago. Heavy First Nations interest and participation. And also, as part of the agreement, a whole bunch more caribou habitat protection that's going to be put in place. So part of the agreement that the mining company came forward to the First Nation and then with us as a province is to say, okay, well, we're doing this activity here. We have, the ability to go chop a bunch more wood down, but we don't need to. So why don't we set that aside so that the caribou have a better chance? And that's just, a win for everybody. A lot of jobs, certainly in the region, more than 700, and also a lot of good that comes out of it, especially when you have the participation of the local community. Some communities have more of a mix in their economy. They got a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Others are pretty locked in on one way to make a living. One of the things we've done for forestry is there's been, north of $150 million put towards helping smaller manufacturers, value-added folks, and not just money to support their business, but also we're changing the way that the wood is allocated so that they've got a better shot at being able to get at the wood that they need to create what is much higher value products. Not just higher value, but create more jobs. And we've been saying that as a government for years to the industry, especially some of the larger companies. We've got to share better. We've got to add more value. And we have to do more with less, because we've seen that the annual cut is going down every year. Fire, beetlewood, climate change, like we're seeing real impacts that we can't do forestry the way we did 10, 20 years ago. It's going to have to be different. And it is. But it's good to see the mining sector, the prospecting sector do so well the last couple of years. I've met with the First Nations. I've met with the mining company a couple of times. The project is a bit of a run, and it's in its very infancy stages. I'll probably take a pop down once they get their feet under them a little bit more. I've been visiting the expansion projects up north along Highway 37. Last year we took the Premier up. And I'll be going up to Casca territory and Klinga territory in the northwest, where we have an amazing hydro project. I met with the Premier of Yukon just a couple of weeks ago, and it's actually a run-of-river project that's going to help the Yukon get off of diesel. And they're excited. We're not there yet. We haven't quite figured out all the financing, but we're getting closer and closer. And it's Tlingit owned. It's a Tlingit majority owned project. Then you got revenue going back into the community in a major way. We also did a bunch of funding as a province for coastal communities. A lot of those, Robert, have been stuck on diesel power for decades. Very, very expensive, super polluting. And so there's a whole bunch of communities that steadily have been coming off and putting in run a river or tidal, solar, even on the coast, solar can work, right? And importantly, getting off the diesel, which, eventually we'll get Haida Gwaii there. We'll move the entire coast off of what has been a very polluting energy source for a long time.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Thank you for staying with us. Air source heat pumps move heat between the air inside the home and the air outside the home, while ground source heat pumps transfer heat between the air inside the home and the ground outside the home. Let us return to the conversation as Minister Cullen shares how all heat pumps are not created equally.
Some of the energy exchange projects, so that you can have a heat pump essentially put in your home, doesn't work great everywhere. Like if you're in subarctic temperatures, you need a very special kind of machine to pull it off. But definitely on our coastal communities, I've seen entire villages switch over, where every community, every house over time moves to one of these heat pumps. And I was talking to one elder, and she said she brought her total energy bill down. That was heating, lighting, everything, 40%, because she brought one of these heat pumps in year over year, like just a direct, almost half savings. Never mind getting off of baseboard heaters and stuff that weren't working. So the technology's there, and whether your concern is climate change or just paying the bills, we know that there's more and more green technologies that are available. Folks don't always have the money to buy them, because sometimes they can be out of reach, or just buying a new furnace is expensive. So there's tons of programs now through the province and Canada that help people get into them. And then the payoff is, can be 3, 4, 5 years. And then now you're just making back money basically on where you were before.
Now, you yourself, have you checked into this to see if you are?
Oh, yeah. Totally. My family and I spent a long time, and I'm grateful to say that our struggles in trying to get the program going helped make it more affordable for Northerners, because when we went through it, to get one of the heat pumps for the north where we live was almost twice the price of a heat pump in the south because of the colder conditions. And I said to our government, like, the support is the same whether you live in Coquitlam or you live in Tulkwa. We have very different climates, and we need different heat pumps. And so the program has changed. It's become more generous for Northerners. Unfortunately, I wasn't there at that time. The program we had was not sufficient. We had to put a whole bunch of power into our house, and it was going to be just exorbitant. If we were doing it today, though, we would do it right away, because it's become more affordable and it makes more sense for Northerners. So it didn't benefit me personally, but thankfully the program got changed, and now it's going to work for Northerners a lot better. We actually have formed a rural caucus within the NDP, and there's a bit of a story, because the electoral map in BC, it's the same as Canada. A lot of the seats are in the city, in the suburbs, and as Northerners, as rural people, we can feel left out. But we brought together all the people that are sitting right now in government who are rural MLAs, and there's I think 12 of us out of the 55 or so that are in the caucus. And the Minister of Finance is a rural MLA, myself at Water. And we started to look around the table and say, oh, we have way more influence than maybe people think. So let's use it. And one of the things is we wanted to change, and we are changing the way that health takes care of people's travel. If you need to travel for cancer care or maternity or whatever it is, we started to change the BC ferry policies, and we're looking to do more. So I really welcome people's ideas. When you're engaging with government, some stuff you can do online, but a lot of stuff you can't. And what are the main challenges of living in the north, changing ICBC policies, those kinds of things. I really want to have a loud voice for rural BC, and to tell the story that the government's in power right now, has some really influential people that live in small and rural towns. Let's make sure that the rural reality is reflected in the way that we make decisions.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
Welcome back to Open Connection. There are so many reasons to have a coffee conversation. Unlike conversation over dinner, a coffee conversation suggests a relaxed talk without pressure. They're good for our first meeting. A coffee conversation suggests how long the interaction will last. It can provide a fast connection with someone without a commitment of a longer meeting. Let us return to the conversation as Minister Cullen shares some of the topics that come up when he has coffee in public.
We do these little coffee things all the way, Stewart and Dees Lake and little tiny towns to the big metropolis of Smithers, Telqua and Hazelton's. I really like it because folks can come in a place where they're comfortable. They don't have to come to my office. They don't have to get all formal about it. They can just be coming by and they'll know, and you'll see some people kind of wander in and they're a little unsure, and then they'll wander over and they'll say, hey, there's this regulation for hunting that makes no sense. I've wondered about it for years. Who do I talk to? And then we can have an exchange. And I find that sometimes as Northerners, we're a little humble about it. We're a bit quiet about not wanting to complain, which is, I respect. We also got to know where the problems are, what can be fixed. And not anything's going to be perfect, but yeah, it's my preferred way to get with people. I'll be at a trade show this weekend in Smithers. I'll go to the Kiskioks Rodeo. I'll be up in Atlin at a couple of their events. And sometimes that's where you get the best interaction because you're in somebody else's space. You're in their comfort place, and people feel a little more at ease saying, I like you guys, okay, but here's one thing that you could really change. And that for me is the most vital thing. I honestly don't get a lot of that from Facebook or Twitter. That's a different place. People talk differently there. But it's oftentimes in the more casual, the coffee shops, the concerts, the kids, track and field, that's where you can really hear from people.
And do you find that when you have these little meetings, does industry kind of pop up and say, hey, we're kind of thinking about doing something here? They initiate a conversation there and say, hey, can we go back?
A little less and I have a very formal role, right, when it comes to industry, because running the ministry that I run, water, land, and resource stewardship, right? We do the land use planning. We do a lot of the engagement on First Nations rights and title. I am very careful when I'm sitting with industry or they come up that it's not done as casually as somebody saying, there's a turn on the highway that's a bit rough. Is there a way that, that's a different thing. So industry tends to come at me a lot more formally, which I prefer. You got staff there, you're really paying attention because I've got legal obligations, frankly, and never want to be, I don't go to a lot of things, Robert, that folks have gained access because they've paid a lot of money, for example. I keep it pretty tight. When I'm sitting with industry, I want to be respectful of that conversation and know that they're important, yet they shouldn't have any preferred access over anybody else. We have a bunch that have happened already. The Tahltan have one, the Tlingit have got one, looking for a second. You need the certain hydrology, right? You need a pretty fast flowing river, and you need to be able to do it so it doesn't affect salmon. It's particular parts of the province. But we're seeing it more on the coast, where even very small ones, because it's kind of always running, you can generate quite a bit of power, and it's very localized. You don't have to send it hundreds of kilometers, and that can be a real benefit because you're maximizing every bit of power you're getting. We're seeing a lot more. Just talked to a First Nations contractor, a Wet'suwet'en contractor. His business has grown 400% in the last 3 years. And hired more and more people, and is now at that stage of training the next generation coming in because he's short workers. Everybody is short workers. So that for me feels like now we're talking about generational change, where folks have got the capital, they've got the business, and now they've got crews of folks coming through doing work. The money's not leaving the region anymore. Just too many times we see this where someone comes in and they cut wood, or they're mining or fishing or whatever, and you just see 90% of the wealth leave. I'm all for small. Small is beautiful. Local is beautiful. The more we can do, the better. And we've got support for people to get into business and then sustain them when they're there. But we're short workers. That's a huge topic I hear everywhere. We're 150,000 short right now in BC. And the jobs numbers just came out today for Canada, and it's another report of very, very strong jobs. We just released a training program for the whole province, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it's helping students get access to more funding, opening up more spaces. It's been so well received by industry, by the business sector, by colleges, and young people coming up. There's just so much need for them to get the training, stay in school, and get smart. And that's what we're going to do, because this jobs need is going to be there for a long time.
And that touches on a subject that's very polarizing, and it's like, we need workers. It seems that before COVID, everything seems to be going along fine, but then after COVID, I guess some people kind of did a lifestyle change, and they're going, I'm not sure if I go back to work or this. This remote work, that's really working for me too.
Yep. And government has as well. Just last month, the provincial government changed, like, virtually across the board its policy for working for BC. So I met some of the people that work for my ministry just last week, and one, she lives in Nelson, but she supports somebody in Williams Lake. Another person lives in Smithers, but is working with a team out of Campbell River. And I was just watching all these points, and they see each other maybe a couple times a year, maybe, but they're really comfortable with this. And I think that's good. We have real needs in this province. Our needs are extensive, and housing being the predominant one. Training, housing, qualifying people faster for being nurses and doctors and veterinarians, and we're making more seats available for everything, but we also have to qualify people who live in other parts of Canada, and then we have to have a place for them to live. So we're building more housing now, low income, middle, whatever, than BC has ever built, and it's still not enough. So it's a good problem to have, I guess, Robert. I've lived through the reverse, when we just, not enough jobs, real stresses on the community. The housing is not worth anything, too much housing. I guess this is a good problem to have, but it's still a problem.
Open Connection will be right back after these messages. And now, from the CFTK-TV studios, this is Open Connection with your host, Robert Pictou.
The Homes for People plan will speed up delivery of new homes, increase the supply of The Homes for People plan will speed up delivery of new homes, increase the supply of middle-income housing, fight speculation, and help those who need it the most. That's just some of the examples of the province's new housing plan. In this final segment of Open Connection, Minister Cullen shares how the BC government is helping people find housing.
I can think of communities where we've found a teacher, great teacher, comes in, and 2 months later has to leave because they were unable to find housing. Nurses, docs. So we have changed the rules around building housing, permitting. That's part of what my ministry does a lot of, is speeding up the permitting process. So I just got a report last week. There is a permit, doesn't really matter what it is, but it's a permit that you often need to build housing with. And up until Christmas, it was taking 12, 14 months on average, this one permit. We've got it down to now, by June, it'll be on average 30 days. And you got to keep your high standards, right? You got to look at it, but you also got to not clog up the system with the no-brainer permits that we've done 1,000 times. You got to speed them up, because when you delay a project a year, I can tell you, building a school or apartments or whatever, the price goes up 10, 20%. So whether you're building public infrastructure or someone's trying to build housing for people, if your permitting thing takes 3 years, it's basically saying that house is going to cost another 30, 40%. The rent is going to be 30, 40% higher. The school is going to cost 30% more. So we've really undertaken as government that we were 21,000 permits behind. That was our backlog. And my mandate, my job is to get that way down. implicate First Nations way more in the permitting process, and speed things up for those that need to be sped up. Now, there's some permits that should never be issued and they won't, bad projects. But the ones that are pretty obvious to everybody, let's get on with it. Here's a change that we did, really well received, just a few weeks ago, where somebody said they got a normal house sitting on a lot, and they're older, and they actually want their kids to be able to move in with them. They're getting older, need less space, but they got this house that doesn't work. If you wanted to get a permit to make that into a duplex or a triplex, you could be looking at some of our communities 2 or 3 years to get that permitted. Well, that is difficult for people to get a mortgage, and it makes it a mess. So we changed the permitting for the entire province that says somebody sitting on that single family dwelling can permit that into a duplex, triplex, even a fourplex without having to go to City Hall. Your house can change into that. And I've seen places here in the north where the parents are on the ground floor, the kids with the grandkids are upstairs, and they got a renter on the side. Fantastic. There's 2 extra units, and now people living in home that might otherwise have ended up in a long-term care facility or a hospital because they're able to have the kids nearby. I think that's the kind of creativity that we need when thinking about, we can't just keep expanding out. Sometimes we got to go up. We got to make things a little bit more dense.
Yeah, and that brings the next one. It's like, as we get older too, sometimes, if we do have family around, that actually makes it so we don't have to go to
That's right.
facility.
Yeah. This is just it. Not everybody, but a lot of people would rather live at home, right? Until they absolutely can't anymore. I know I got aging parents, and I look at them, and they're not getting down the stairs so great. And we as a family really have to have that conversation. But if you've got a housing system and a permit system that is standing in your way, that all gets difficult. And then at some point, you're saying, well, we gotta put you in a home, and we don't want to do it. We got to really put people first, and that's what the government's trying to do with all of this. Is think about, okay, what are people going to need? We have an aging population. We got a really expensive housing market. Okay, what makes sense? And policies like this really make sense, and that's why people are really embracing it, I think.
And Nathan, is there anything I might have missed that you'd like to add?
Really important day today, Red Dress Day. There's a procession going out of Smithers out to Whitsett. Just thinking a lot about the families today. Missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. Been on too many marches, Robert. We're trying to make things better, but this is a day of remembering and then the recommitment each and every day to doing better. Yeah, Red Dress Alert. This is something I've asked our government to look at. Is there some way that when we know someone's gone missing and they're vulnerable, like is MP Leah Gazan has put this forward. She's out of the prairies. Taylor Backrack's been talking about it up here in the north. What can we work with police? Can we find out, is this right? And if it's led by First Nations communities and people are concerned with this, then it's something I think we should look at for sure.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but Thank you for joining us for this episode of Open Connection. The greatest distance in the existence of man is not from here to there, but the connection from his mind and heart. If we can conquer that distance, we can soar like an eagle and realize our immensity within. I'm Robert Pictou.